Welcome, Clair Obscur, Expedition 33, a haunting journey through art, memory, and the fragile boundary between reality and fantasy. Today, I'll take you through the full story, a tale of grief, family, and the cost of escape. Please note that this video will be full of spoilers. If you enjoy this video, please consider liking and subscribing to support this humble channel and for more lore videos such as this one. The story of Clair Obscur starts with a scene where we meet our first protagonist, Gustave. But it's not clear in the beginning. All we know is that there is this guy that seems very sad and in anticipation of something that isn't clear to us yet. Then another character comes in called Maelle. And it's obvious from the interaction that they are very close, and she is much younger than Gustave, so it's likely they are siblings or good friends. Maelle teases Gustave and pushes him that he and his ex-girlfriend, Sophie, are still in love, and that he must find her before an event called the Gommage happens. We learn here that in this town that's called Lumiere, a big fracture or catastrophic event happened, and the world was completely fractured into pieces, and many people died, and in the distance we can see a big monolith, mountain, with a scary figure on it called the Painters, and every year, two major events happen in this town. First, the Gommage, which is where anyone who turns 32 years old disappears into dust and just ceases to exist. And due to that, no one in Lumiere is older than 32. So people marry and have kids very early on to guarantee the town's continuity. However, due to the Gommage, the town is basically full of orphans whose parents have been gommaged, so we learn that Maelle is one of these orphans and was taken in family after family until she found herself being raised by Gustave and his sister. And a second happening, an expedition, where young people or people younger than 32 years old volunteer to be part of an expedition that ventures out to the continent to explore and try to reach the Painters to defeat her. Usually people who are 31 go on this expedition because they have only one more year to live and therefore are somewhat expendable, and this expedition, or which expedition will embark on the journey every year to the continent, is decided by a number that the Painters draws on her mountain, and in this case it will be Expedition 33, which includes until now Gustave, who is 31, and Maelle, who is 16, which is young, but she insisted to take part. Also we learn that this world is made primarily from a material called chroma, and this chroma constitutes everything, from each and every organism in the world to even their powers. They are able to summon and manipulate chroma based on the power each person has. However, pure chroma is not in very high supply. If we were to give an analogy for chroma in this world, it would be like carbon in our world, as everything is made out of carbon. After that, we see Gustave finding Sophie and spending some time with each other, albeit in sadness, because Sophie is going to be gommaged, and Gustave is going to go on the expedition. So we can deduce that Gustave is 1 year younger than Sophie. And their sadness is also driven by the fact that they decided on not having children and leaving them behind to be orphans. But this means that their line will end. After spending some time together and then reconfessing their love for each other, the Gommage happens and we see Sophie disappear from Gustave's arms. After the Gommage, we see Gustave bidding farewell to his students and promising them that he will fill out info in his journal for them to learn from. In the future, whether he comes back or he dies, and they find his journal in the future on the continent when their time comes to go on their own expedition. So that we see Gustave meeting the other expeditioners, and we meet the next two important protagonists in the game, Lune and Sciel. Before they go, Gustave speaks to his sister, who is head of the town committee, or like a mayor, that begs him not to go and spend the last year he has with her, but he refuses it. It is at this point where the mayor gives them a heartfelt and inspiring speech as they get on the ships and go to the continent on the quest to attempt to reach the Painters and defeat her, so that future generations can actually get old and live their lives without fear of being gommaged. While they are at sea, a massive storm hits, and they are set off course, and land on a remote part of the continent that's dark and scary, and a feeling of impending doom blankets everyone. And it is at this moment that we see a figure emerge from the darkness, and this figure is human, and from his attire it's obviously he's from Lumiere, maybe a survivor of a previous expedition. However, this figure has a very distinct characteristic that takes everyone aback, a shocking characteristic that they've never seen. He is old, far older than 32, and as they approach him to investigate and ask him how he is old, he attacks, and his attack is ruthless and swift, killing most of the expedition, except Gustave and Lune. After the dust settles and Gustave and Lune reunite, the feeling of despair is too much for Gustave, to take, especially knowing that he lost his little sister Maelle, and the two of them alone have no chance at succeeding in their expedition. So he attempts to take his own life, but Lune convinces him that they are trained for this, and their motto isn't if one dies we continue, but rather the motto is when one die we continue. So it's when and not if, meaning they are all ready to put their lives down for the expedition and the greater good of future generations, and he owes it to Lumiere and the memory of Maelle to continue. Hearing that, Gustave agrees and they embark. However, upon reaching an area called the Spring Meadows, they find a message left for them on a tree. And in this message, it is informing them that Maelle is still alive, and where her location is. At this moment, Lune objects, because it will deviate them from their mission, and that this might as well be a trap. However, Gustave sees no reason, and no goal other than to find Maelle, and informs Lune that if she wants to continue alone without him, he will not stand in her way. However, he will not allow her to stop him from going after Maelle. So Lune, being the logical person she is, due to the fact that her parents were scholars and raised her as a researcher, realizes that she has no choice but to follow Gustave, which she does. On the way, they face many foes called Nevrons, and each Nevron is different in terms of strength, size, and aggressiveness. Eventually, they reach an area called the Hanging Waters, which, as the name suggests, is an area where the ocean is above our team. And they also fight many enemies until eventually they reach a structure that looks like a hut, which was mentioned in the message left for them. Against Lune's warnings and objections, they open the door and enter, only to find that they have entered into a massive and beautiful manor, full of locked doors, except one. And in that room, when they enter that room, they find Maelle, who at first wonders if they are real. And when she realizes they are, it is a beautiful reunion which gave our Gustave such life, purpose, and happiness. They asked Maelle how she got there, and she said that she just woke up in the manor, and that a mysterious and scary figure called the Curator took care of her. After they all meet the Curator, it turns out that this Curator, a scary creature, seemingly made of bark, with a hollow face that doesn't talk but rather growls, is there to assist them on their journey, teach them a few fighting moves, and help them with their equipment. However, aside from that, we know nothing about this Curator, and most importantly, his motivations, which we will learn later on in the game. After leaving the manor, we meet a funny-looking figure that looks like a talking, walking brush, which turns out to be called a Jestrel. And these Jestrels have only two goals in their lives, trading and fighting. So we learn that we can trade with them or fight them for even bigger rewards. Lune, being the scholar she is shocked, as she always thought that Jestrels are myths, and insists to see their village and meet more of them. And considering that either way, to be able to continue on their journey, they will have to pass through the Jestrel village, so this Jestrel called Nico tells them how to reach the village, and they embark. However, in between days, they camp out to rest, and anytime they would fall asleep, Maelle would have visions of the old man who killed everyone on the beach. And in her visions, he is watching her with someone else, who is a disfigured girl. And this girl has almost the same build and appearance of Maelle, but she's disfigured. However, every time Maelle has these visions, the visions are the same. They are of this old man, telling her, Maelle, to cancel her quest and go back home and not meddle with things she does not understand. Even in one of the visions, we see this man arguing with the disfigured girl, telling her that they should never see her, and she should stay home, and when she objects, he points to Maelle and asks this unknown girl, don't you see who she is and whom she looks like? These visions will become clearer and more explained in the future. Now the expedition has three people, Gustave, Maelle, and Lune, and eventually they reach the Jestrel village, where they meet the chief called Golgra. And Golgra tells them that in order to pass, they must prove themselves in combat, and that after they combat a string of Jestrel warriors, each different from the last, they will have to face a mysterious warrior. And if they are proven successful, then, and only then, they can pass. After defeating the Jestrel warriors one after the other, they face this mysterious warrior who turns out to be Sciel from the expedition. And she explains to them that after what happened on the beach, she was alone and eventually found herself in the Jestrel village, and decided to stay there as their warrior, because she thought that she was the only one left alive, and her alone has zero chance of any expedition success. So she decided to stay there and at least be safe until her time comes to go Maj or until other expeditioners come by. However, to the Jestrels, Sciel is still their warrior, so they have a friendly battle, which satisfies Golgra, and then she allows them to come and go to the village as they please, and to trade with her Jestrels throughout their journey. While on their journey, it's clear to them that there are areas on their way that are too rugged for them to traverse, and need something to help them move through this harsh world, especially through water and air, as they don't have their boats anymore. So they seek out a friendly creature called Eski. We find Eski bathing in a cave, and he is massive, but also lovely and friendly, like a teddy bear. And for some reason, says to Sciel, this is the second time they've met, and asks if she has learned how to swim. This will become clear in the future. They inform Eski of their journey, which Eski knows because he has met many expeditions in his days, but sadly they all died. Eski tells them that he can carry them anywhere they need to go. However, in order for him to be able to do so, he needs special rocks. One rock for traversing the harsh landscape, one rock for swimming, and one rock for flying. And the first rock, fortunately, is with his grumpy rock neighbor, whom is called Francois, but he calls him Froom Froom, which infuriates Francois, who is a bitter and very grumpy Nevron rock, but for some reason they are best friends, him and Eski. Though Francois would never admit that. After a brief battle with Francois, he admits that he doesn't have the rock, but rather it's on a cliff somewhere, which we will have to go get for Eski. And even though Eski will accompany us on the journey, there is no way we can ride him before we get the rock. We embark on the quest to get this rock and meet many foes, but at the end we meet the boss, the Lamp Master. That is the hardest one yet. But the team managed to vanquish him, and Sciel and Lune jump down to Eski in celebration. In this moment of relief and minor success, Gustave and Maelle decide to stay back for a while on the cliff and contemplate their relationship, and even play a game of rock throwing as they did back in Lumiere. But their brief moment of happiness is cut short by Gustave being attacked by the old man and them fighting. We can see Maelle imprisoned in a force field so that she doesn't interfere, and we see the disfigured girl watching from above. This old man argues that he gave them ample chances to leave, but they have forced his hand, and he and Gustave battle. Gustave holds his own as much as he can, but the old man turns out to be far more superior and kills Gustave. While Maelle is watching, and Sciel and Luna can't interfere because they are preoccupied with a third attack by the Lamp Master, but they know something is happening above them. After killing Gustave, the old man advances to Maelle, but before he can swing his sword, a mysterious figure jumps in and saves Maelle. It's obvious that these two men have a history with each other, because the old man asks him, is this the route you're gonna take? To which this new figure replies, yes. The old man obviously doesn't want to face this new figure, so he disappears. After the dust settles, this new figure introduces himself to the group, and his name is Verso. Back at camp, we can see a broken and sad group, and especially Maelle is hit really hard by Gustave's death. But with all their sadness, they must learn whatever they can from this mysterious figure, and whether they can trust him or not. Verso is not young. He's not as old as the older guy, but he's definitely older than 32. And he tells them that he and the old guy were part of the very first expedition, Expedition Zero, and that for some reason they became immortal and invulnerable to any harm in the continent, and that's why the old guy doesn't want them to harm the painters, so he can keep living on. Also, the old guy's name is Renoir, so he tells them that 100 years ago, a fracture happened, and that they were the first expedition sent out. Even him and Renoir both contributed to building the dome protecting Lumiere. He also pointed out that he has been with many expeditioners before, and they all died. While he goes on living, at first Luna and Sciel don't trust him or his intentions, but they have no choice, as he can be their guide in this rough and unknown territory. So they keep their concerns to themselves and agree to deal with Verso for now. However, as a sign of kindness and good faith, Verso takes them to a beautiful section of the forgotten battlefield, where many warriors have been buried, and they, against Luna's protest to this deviation from their mission, bury what they can of Gustave, his mechanical arm, to give the group, and mainly Maelle, closure. Verso informs them that in order to travel to where the painters is, they need to pass through Old Lumiere, and then to the monolith. To achieve that, they would need to go get someone called Monoko to help them out. So the team follow Verso to get Monoko, even though, until now, we don't understand why would Monoko be so integral to our journey. But we follow Verso anyway, as he has the experience. We reach the area where Monoko is, and turns out that Monoko and Verso are very good friends and have spent many years together, to an extent that Verso has managed to teach Monoko how to speak English, as Jessos have their own language and Monoko is a Jesso. But this one managed to learn. Monoko is one of the best characters in this. He's funny, cynical, sarcastic, but he has a heart of gold. And the dynamic between him and Verso is hilarious, but also radiates camaraderie and based on mutual love and respect. After a friendly battle, Monoko agrees to accompany them, but before leaving, Monoko informs Verso that in order to succeed, they will need to defeat a massive Nevron called a Stalak. Here we learn that the reason we need Monoko is that Monoko has a special power. Anytime he's part of the party that vanquishes a Nevron, he takes a leg from that Nevron, and that gives him the ability to transform into that Nevron during a fight. This proves very useful, as he can transform into very strong or very big Nevrons and truly assist the team. After getting Monoko, defeating the Stalak, and Monoko subsequently taking its leg, the team embarks on their journey towards Old Lumiere. When they get to the outskirts of Old Lumiere, we learn the reason we need Monoko, as there is a lot of rubble blocking the way into Old Lumiere, and Monoko can transform into the Stalak we defeated earlier and break through, but Monoko gets overexcited and wants to impress the group, so he puts too much force, ultimately shaking the earth and separating the group. After waking up, Maelle and Gustave are together, separated from the rest. Monoko feels very bad and apologizes to Sciel and Lune for wanting to press them. After traversing Old Lumiere, the team learns that this was part of Greater Lumiere, but after the fraction, this piece broke off, and after continuing for a while and facing all the Nevrons they can, Gustave and Maelle reach a manor that seems untouched with people living in it. The doors of this manor open and Renoir comes out, with this disfigured girl watching from the door. But the girl is not allowed to get out, and a figure that resembles the curator is protecting her. But this one is a female, with big grey wavy hair. Before we go further, we check on Sciel, Lune, and Monoko, who are also traversing Old Lumiere, trying to reach the others. But they find another expedition's journal, Expedition Zero, and they learn a shocking truth about Verso, so they rush to try and find Maelle. Eventually they catch up to Verso and Maelle, and they end up facing Renoir, who reveals that Verso is his son. But Verso is tired of his existence, and is tired of the painters gommaging people every year, and he's willing to sacrifice himself, Renoir, and even the disfigured girl to be free from this endless torment. So they face Renoir and defeat him. But at this moment time is frozen, and only Maelle can move. And the ambiance becomes the same as the ambiance in her dreams, and the doors open again, with this little girl seemingly wanting to reach her, but they end up leaving. Back at camp, the team face Verso and confront him as to why he didn't tell them the truth, and he reveals that Renoir is his father, and that he didn't tell them the truth, and he reveals that Renoir is his father, and that little disfigured girl is Alicia, and she's his sister. She became disfigured due to a fire that happened in their house, and she was caught in it. And Verso didn't tell them because he wanted them to trust him and realize that had they known who he was, then he wouldn't have had the chance to prove himself to them. They accepted his excuse, albeit reluctantly, but they had no other choice. They needed him. Verso was always talking to them at camp to make them grow closer to him and trust him. And through one of these conversations, we learn of Sciel's sadness due to the death of her beloved husband, who died not in a gommage or an expedition, ironically, but rather a boating accident. On top of that, we learn that Sciel, out of sadness, tried to kill herself by swimming as far as she can in the ocean, until she lost consciousness, and was calling out to her husband, and she was certain that this was it for her. But she woke up in Lumiere, and we learned that that it was Eski who saved her, because he heard her screams, and that's why he knew her and asked her if she had learned to swim. At this moment, they realized that they needed to make their way to the monolith. However, the monolith is surrounded by a chroma barrier that needs a special weapon to be able to penetrate. Verso tells them that he has never seen that sword, weapon, nor does he know how to get it, but they decide to ask the curator, who's always there in their camp waiting for if they need any assistance, which they do. And he tells them that the weapon exists, but for him to be able to forge it, then he will need a massive amount of pure chroma. And it's at this moment that Verso's face changes to despair. But he realizes how to get that amount of pure chroma, and it would be near impossible. So he tells them to forget about it, as they will need to face Nevrons called Axons, that stand as protectors to the painters, and their hearts are made of pure chroma. But to be able to get their hearts, they need to defeat them, which would be almost impossible, as they are extremely powerful and massive. Regardless of all this, the team insists that they go, so Verso tells them that there are 3 Axons. One that's weak, due to how many expeditioners have attacked it, and it's in the east. The second is fully strong in the west, and the third is very high in the mountains, so we decide to go after the weak Axon first, which is called a Visage. The Axon proves a worthy adversary, as defeating it was very difficult, but we managed to do so. Then we go after the second Axon, Serene, which is a singing Axon that controls everyone's mind through her singing, but we managed to defeat it and get both these Axon's hearts. After defeating both Axons, we go back to camp where Lune tries to hand the curator the pure chroma, but he refuses to take it except from Maelle, as it seems she has a very special affinity to Maelle. Lune hands the chroma to Maelle, who hands it to the curator, and he forges her special sword that is extremely powerful and has the ability to manipulate the chroma around her any way she likes. While at camp, Verso is sitting alone and Alicia comes to him and gives him a sealed letter. He asks her if Renoir is there, but she indicates that she's alone. However, Renoir comes out from the shadows. Verso looks to Alicia angrily, as if she betrayed him, but obviously from her body language she had no idea. At this moment, Renoir faces Verso gently and reminds him that the family is everything, and what he's doing, and if they manage to kill the paintress, then all their family will die. And he indicates that his mother has been broken since he left. Even with him knowing what the consequences of him killing the paintress are, but Verso is steadfast that this is not a life, and they need to end the cycle of misery. Renoir leaves, but informs Verso that he will protect the paintress with everything he has. Back at camp, through conversations, we learn that Lune has always had an affinity to music, but due to her parents' strictness, she was never able to truly pursue. And the reason Lune opens up is because she learns that Verso is, among other things, a pianist. Also, we finally teach Sciel how to swim. After getting the sword, they embark towards the monolith, and they use the sword to break through the barrier. This is the first time anyone has been able to get this far, and the sword proves successful in breaking the barrier, and they go through. When they reach the monolith island, they start attacking the massive painters, but nothing works. So they realize that this might not be the paintress, and the paintress might be hidden. So they move through the area of a fantastical lumiere, and they start to see shadows and images of a woman arguing with her husband, or the same woman teaching her son piano, just images of a normal family. Before reaching the entrance of the paintress, they are faced by Renoir, one last time, and he confronts Verso in front of the group, that he is coming against family, and that this is gonna kill their entire family. But Verso doesn't relent, and they face Renoir and they almost defeat him, but he does not stop and tries to attack again. But Maelle comes up to him, and all of a sudden the curator appears behind Maelle, making her put her hand on Renoir, and he disappears. Confused, the team asks Maelle how she did that, because she disappeared Renoir as if she has painter's powers, but she doesn't know. But she felt the power inside of her. After this, the curator disappears. They realize at this moment that Verso is not only the son of Renoir, but also of the paintress. And then they are sure that he is with them fully, but Lune is still a bit reluctant as facing one's mother is difficult. But they continue and they reach the paintress, who is a female curator but looks frail, broken and sad, and in despair, and kept calling Verso an imposter and that he just looks like Verso, but it's not him. They have a massive battle and eventually defeat her, and she gomages in Verso's arms. This really hits Verso hard, but there's nothing he can do, and he realizes that his journey is finally over. The whole team celebrates, and they return back to Lumiere, where everyone is celebrating. Some others are mourning the loss of their loved ones, like Verso's sister and his students, but the overall ambiance is that of happiness and relief, because now they can grow old and be happy, and even though the price to get to that point has been very high, but it was worth it. We move to Verso, who is sitting on the docks alone, and for the first time he looks like someone who is truly taking a breath, resting, and while he's sitting there he decides to open Alicia's letter, and in the letter she tells him that she is at peace with how he decided to live his life and what he's about to do. But she reveals a shocking truth, that the paintress was never of death, but of life. She continues that the paintress painted to give life, while he, who is he we don't know, always wanted to erase it, and thus kill all of her creations. And the only reason the gommage was limited was because of the paintress, but now that she's gone, there is no one from stopping him from gommaging everyone, same as if Thanos had flicked his fingers and erased everyone in the world, even Maelle. At this moment, Verso looks up into the distance and sees a massive shockwave radiate towards Lumiere, and when it reaches everyone starts to gommage. And in the panic, we can see all of them trying to understand what is happening, but failing, while Verso knows what happened. And he finally has been successful at gommaging, thus killing everyone, even Maelle. After this, we find ourselves in an unfamiliar bedroom, and a girl that looks suspiciously like Maelle is waking up. But this girl's face is disfigured, much like if she was a mixture of Alicia and Maelle. And we hear a voice telling her, "Good, you're up. come down to the studio. And while going down, we see evidence of a fire and a glimpse of Verso, looking clean and young, assuring her that it is okay. Even when she reaches the studio, she sees her father, who looks like Renoir, and her mother, stuck in time, facing a lively painting, and her older sister Clair, tells her that her father and mother are still in the painting fighting, and that Clair needs her father, because apparently the family is part of a community of painters, and they are at war with a party of writers, and these writers tricked Maelle to let them in to the manor under false pretenses of peace, but they burned the manor, effectively disfiguring her and killing her older brother, Verso. And in this war, Clair is very involved and needs her father's help, but her father is preoccupied because, and here is the kicker, in the twist of the story, is busy fighting her mother inside the painting, because this is no normal painting, but rather a special painting that was painted by Verso when he was young, and a part of his soul is in it. And due to the fact that he painted it with chroma, it has magical powers that allows the person to enter it. But entering the painting for a long time makes the person weak, so basically after the death of Verso, his mother was in such despair that she retreated from the real world and entered this fictional world painted by her son and became the paintress. So it was her and the father that caused the fraction. And the him that wants to delete it is her husband. And Verso's father, the real Renoir, who wants to erase the painting, not out of malice, out of love. Because in his mind, as long as the painting is there, and he will lose his wife and the mother of his children. But if he erases it, then he can get her back. A type of tough love. So basically all of the characters we see in the world, we've been enthralled in for such a long time, trying to kill the painters while thinking the curator, our ally, is just a magical painting, and the paintress paints life, the mother creates, while the curator, the father, erases, and thus gommaging. And after a group of heroes killed the paintress, she, the mother, was kicked out of the painting, which gave the curator, the father, the freedom to gommage everyone. And due to the fact that the mother had been in the painting a very long time, she was very weak, so while she rested, the disfigured girl, the real Maelle, hides the canvas, so that neither one of her parents can use it in a destructive way to themselves or the painting itself. Because their mother was losing herself in her grief, and their father was losing himself chasing after their mother. This is an important point, showing that people deal with grief very differently, and we should not judge people based on how they deal with their grief. It's worth mentioning that time in the canvas moves differently than in the real world, where a lifetime in the canvas can be mere minutes in the real world. And that's why the body outside gets so heavily affected, because the mind is convinced that a huge duration is passing, thus affecting the body the same way as if the same amount of time was passing in the real world. This is a personal theory, as when we see the real mother, she looks extremely old. It's kind of like the Matrix movie, where environmental stimulus in the Matrix can have the same effect on your body in the real world. At this moment, the real Maelle goes back into the painting and realizes that she is a paintress as well, and has the same powers, so she uses chroma to bring back Verso, who tells her that he has always known of the facts, but didn't tell anyone as he wanted to end it all. And on top of that, he has always looked after her to make sure she's safe, and he is the one who saved her from the beach and carried her to the manor after Canvas Renoir attacked. Now Maelle has always struggled with her feeling that she is unwanted, because Verso was loved by all, and Cleo was the pride of all, but she realizes that she was painted into this painting as a very loved daughter, and called Maelle the princess. And Verso informs her that her father, even with her disfigurement, dubbed her his shining star. So everyone we know, Renoir, Alicia, Clair, which we meet in the flying manor in the map, and even Verso, were drawn by the main paintress, the mother, in real life, and she is in an endless battle against her husband, the real Renoir, that wants to erase all of her creations because she can't live in a fantasy world. Especially that it seems that time moves differently in the canvas, where a minute in the real world might be a lifetime inside the canvas. However, Maelle, not knowing the truth about her father, tells Verso that when her father comes, he will help her recreate everyone. Because to her, it was her mother erasing everyone, and not her father, while Verso knew. So he cautioned her, but she didn't listen, until the real Renoir appears, and asks her what she's doing there, and she tells him that she wants his help bringing everyone back. But he tells her to leave, and she realizes that he's the one erasing everyone. And at this moment he creates massive monsters. This is when they run away, Verso and her. While at the camp, Verso admits that he has always known, and that is why he has always wanted to cancel his existence, but Maelle convinces him that he is his own person, regardless of him being a copy or a clone of the real Verso. It's at this moment when Maelle realizes where she can get chroma. So she goes to every body of every expeditioner she can find and extracted their chroma, and then she brought back Lune, Sciel, Eski, and Monoko, and explained to them what had happened, and the truth of the world and their existence. And she, Maelle, apologizes that she had no idea, and they accept that, but it was hard for them to forgive Verso. But to some extent they understand his reasons, and Verso knows that he will do whatever he can to regain their trust, and most importantly, their forgiveness. We also learned that Eski was painted by the real Verso as a comforting and friendly character to act as a sort of guardian angel. At this point, Maelle realizes that the only way for this world to be preserved is if they vanquish her father, the real Renoir, and her to recreate everyone and let them live in peace. So we head to Lumiere, where the real Renoir is waiting. When we arrive in Lumiere, it's a dark and scary landscape full of nevrons conjured by Renoir and waiting to attack anyone who comes there. So Maelle, with her limited experience and her new powers as a paintress, conjures up as many expeditioners as she can, and they all attack to give our group of heroes the opening to reach Renoir, who's in the tower on the other side of town. On the way, we are obliged to face some of the nevrons and defeat them, but eventually we reach Renoir, who's waiting for us. When we reach him, he and Maelle have a discussion on the motivation and grief, and he informs her that the only way to continue is for the canvas to be destroyed, ultimately killing everyone inside the painting and erasing this fantastical world, because that's the only way he can get his family back. Maelle interjects that the people in the painting have become her family, and she will not let them go without a fight. Renoir interjects angrily that staying in the canvas for a long time will eventually have the same adverse effect on her that it had on him, and her mother, and the scary morphology they saw of the curator and the paintress is the result of staying there for too long and their bodies withering and dying in the real world, and that he was once stuck in the painting before and was enthralled by its scenery and effects, especially after the real Verso died. But her mother saved him and made him see reason that staying in the canvas for so long is not living, but rather hiding from reality, a reality that they must face. Verso died, yes, but life moves on. Maelle was disfigured, yes, but she is still his shining star. And he only realized that due to their mother. However, after he woke up and came to his senses, for some reason their mother did the same mistake and went into the canvas. And he has been trying to do for her what she did for him, but with no avail. And all the while he's losing what remains of his family. Clay is fighting her solitary war, their mother is dying while in the canvas, Maelle's body is suffering due to her injuries, Verso is dead, and now Maelle fights him in the canvas as well. He ends by saying that he will not lose the ones he loves. Maelle informs him that she loves the people of the canvas, the same way he loves his family. Seeing that he can't convince Maelle, as she has already made up her mind and has already conjured up her sword, he transforms into the mighty curator and prepares for battle. They battle and eventually they are successful, enough to make him reach the brink of defeat. But he summons his Axon, Serene, that heals him. The group realizing that they can't defeat him as long as he keeps healing, and eventually he will defeat them through sheer exhaustion. Maelle at this point begs help from her mom, who somehow found the canvas and enters with what little energy she has left and defeats the Axon, leaving Renoir without a means to heal. Renoir's anger is palpable as he screams to his wife to not be selfish and let her family go down this path, but with no avail. So Renoir summons a family painting which seems to be the gateway in and out of the canvas, and enters it to recharge himself and comes back out. And they face each other again, and the group eventually defeats Renoir, finally. At this point, Maelle stops the attack as she doesn't want to kill her father, but rather make him see her reasoning. And he explains to her what he does is not out of hate or maliciousness, but out of love for his family and his desire to fix what is left of his family and make them move on to better days, which he promises Maelle there will be. But Maelle refuses and makes it clear that her life is in the canvas, and the people there are very important to her. Aside from the fact that the canvas also being the last remaining piece of her brother, the real Verso, and the fact that she blames herself for his death. However, she promises her father a compromise, that she will not stay inside the canvas long enough to be stuck or compromised, as he or her mother once were, and she will be smart about coming in and out, and most importantly, the duration she will stay inside. He accepts her promise even though he doesn't believe her. And they embrace, and Renoir Gommage is finally leaving the campus. During their entire interaction, we can see Verso looking at them with uncertainty or doubt, or more importantly, a certain realization. And while the battle was happening, he can see the mother from the other side collapsing in front of the canvas. And it's not clear if she dies, but she seems extremely weak. This hits him hard, and Sciel comes to him to comfort him, but with no avail. So he walks towards the doorway, and all the while they are trying to convince him otherwise, but he just looks back, says, "I am sorry," and walks in. Inside the painting doorway, we see a beautiful universe-like world that is probably the transition path between the real world and the canvas world. And there we see a young boy with the morphology of the curator that is painting non-stop. And Verso realizes that this boy is the remaining piece of the real Verso that is keeping the canvas alive, and he tries to convince him that he must be tired and should stop painting. But at this moment, Maelle appears and implores with Verso not to do it. Verso confronts Maelle, and now we learn the meaning behind his looks when Maelle and Renoir were talking, and he accuses Maelle of lying to Renoir, insinuating that it is never her intention to leave the canvas, and she will die there. He continues by trying to convince Maelle to let go of the canvas and live her life, her real life, and forget about them and the canvas, but she refuses, saying that in the canvas she is whole, and has the possibility of living a real life, while in the outside world she is but a shell of her former self, disfigured and unable to speak, with extreme guilt due to what happened to her real brother, the real Verso. Canvas Verso makes it forcefully clear that he can't live this way, and he wants to cease to exist, and he doesn't listen, and he continues to try to stop the boy from painting, and it's at this point Maelle stops him by flashing her sword, and displaying her willingness to battle him, to save the canvas. At this point, we are faced by two options, either fighting as Verso and defeating Maelle, or fighting as Maelle and defeating Verso. In my gameplay, I chose Maelle and we defeat Verso, who starts to disappear, Gommage, and with his last breath, he begs Maelle to set him free and let him fade away, but Maelle refuses and begs him to stay while offering a compromise, that maybe he would be happy if she paints him as old and allows his life to progress normally, and he can eventually die of old age like any normal human being. The screen fades to black, and we see a restored Lumiere, with everyone seemingly happy, and we find ourselves inside the opera house waiting for a performance of some kind, and we see Lune waiting for Maelle and a child who is Gustave's pupil, accompanying her, and we see Sciel with her husband. We see Gustave and Sophie even, so we realize that Maelle has painted them all back. They all sit down in the first row, preparing for the performance. It's then that we see an old Verso walking on stage towards the piano to perform, as he promised them way back when, in the camp, that he will do so, if they succeed. Verso prepares to play, but he is obviously reluctant and still conflicted about being alive, and he looks towards Maelle, who nods at him, and gives him the courage and strength to start. And while he's playing, he looks back at Maelle one last time, and the scene closes with us seeing the effects of staying in the canvas for too long starting to show on Maelle. We are left with the realization that Maelle's morphology is starting to transform into that of the creator or the painters before, meaning that her body in the real world is starting to wither and to die. This is a beautiful story that deals with grief, family, loyalty, and self-realization in a way that no other story has done. We learn the limits we are willing to reach sometimes, not only to protect the ones we love, but also to not face reality, in a way that shows that not facing the real world and dealing with grief or hardship is as destructive, or even more so, than actually dealing with reality. It also shows the strength and importance of family, and the fact that when we have a loving family, we never have to face bad things alone, but rather as a unit, and that unity can make us much stronger than we actually are solo. If you made it all the way here, I thank you for watching the whole video, and if it's not much, please comment, like, and subscribe.